Good evening, ladies and gents. Episode 5 of Riddler's Rambles, and I'm ready for another episode. Now, first things first, as always, a massive shout out and thank you to the patrons, because you guys are helping me out massively. If anyone does want to contribute that little bit more and get involved, the link will be in the description. But otherwise, I will very momentarily be introducing today's guest. Now, today's guest is a little bit of an enigma. And is also an avid fish keeper as well. So the majority of what we're going to be chatting about today is plants, obviously, which can be quite a good one, because if you're like me and you kill your plants and your vivs all the time, this might help you as well. And also fish keeping. We will touch on reptile keeping, of course. But yeah, it's going to be a good one. So ladies and gents, can I introduce to you all Baum himself, otherwise known as Treee. How are you, mate? You all good?
Oh yeah, I'm very good. Just came back from an old friend visiting that I haven't seen him in like half a year. It was really good. Okay. Yeah. Now we're here.
Yeah, ideal. Did you get up to much? Was it a nice time?
No, we just went to the Christmas market, had some Glühwein, like some hot wine. I'm not sure how to say that in English. Normally, I'm pretty proficient with my English, but yeah, Glühwein is Glühwein. I don't fucking
know. Hot wine over here, we call it mulled wine.
Mulled wine, all right.
Yeah, mulled wine.
That probably.
Actually, that's not a bad shout. In actual, I mean, the missus won't be able to have it this year because obviously she's pregnant. But me personally, I mean, I'm having a little Bailey's at the minute. That's what I'm enjoying right now because it's been a little while. I don't really drink, if at all. But when it gets to Christmas, you know, when you just go, I'll have a little something, especially when you're not at work.
There's not much else to do, like, realistically. Like, the fish tank behind me is full of South American tetras. I freaking love them. Like, these are like the fish that I personally find super interesting for whatever reason. They're not especially smart, they're not especially charismatic or whatever, but just the way they behave, I kind of dig it. And like, I don't know, the other tank, I got a bunch of cichlids, some barbs, and honestly, like, I got the what's the name? Like it's one of the like really classic like beginner cichlids, crebensis.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah. They're nice.
Used to have 2. Then they had some babies, and like I had a lot of my tetras with them in the tank, like 200 liters, 1 meter wide at that time. And essentially, the 2 parents managed to corral all the tetras, literally every other fish in the tank, to the very right 10 centimeters of the tank when they had babies. It was kind of insane. Like, I was on holiday when they spawned, and when I came back, like, I had 25 fish just stacked up in like 20 liters of water on the very right side of the tank. And like, crebensis are just way too good parents. Like, I have over 30 of these motherfuckers now. No fish store wants them because they get them in all the time. Like, I had a check at my local fish store today, and they've gone down enough where I'm going to be like, yeah, maybe soon I'll be all right, because like most of the fish I got in my other tank, I'm not really into, if I'm honest. I got like 1 species of South American cichlid that I really like. They're called red breast acara, I think is the English name.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they're like 5-6 centimeters long. They're like a dwarf cichlid sort of species, but a little bit chunkier, I would say. I freaking love them. Like, it's probably of the cichlids that I've kept over the like 20-ish years that I've been keeping fish tanks, like my favorite cichlid, hands down. They're super interactive. They look beautiful. They change colors to a ridiculous degree, but I don't know. I got a bunch of barbs in there, and like they just don't do anything for me. Like
Okay.
they're active, they're rambunctious, but at the end of the day, they're kind of a death tornado. Like I had I'm not sure what the English name is. It's like a barb that basically has a all black body and like a red head. And I bought like 12 or 14 of those.
Mm-hmm.
I'm down to 6 because there's always one that's like at the bottom of the hierarchy, and all the other barbs pick on this one until it dies.
Right. Okay.
And like I've gone to half my stock for this barb, and it's like I don't know. I have a bunch of fish that will fight, like my emperor tetras.
Yeah.
That I've been keeping for like I think the oldest male that I got in the tank behind me is like close to 6 years at this point old.
Oh wow. Okay.
And like even there, I've seen, especially when I had lower stock density, when like I originally had like 5 or 6 of them, then like a few babies cropped up, and like out of those 6 babies, I got like 3 extra males.
Okay.
And in the smaller tank, like I had maybe 10 emperor tetras in total, and every now and then you get into this situation where like the big daddy would get into fights with one of his sons for like 2 days in a row or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Like them constantly circling and biting each other, and like even to the point, one of the more hardcore instances of that, you'd have like 4, like one of the fish had like 4 little cookie cutter bites taken out of the side.
Mm-hmm.
But even that fish still lives. Like it has tiny little scars. If you know where the bites were originally, you can see like some skin imperfections and whatnot. But
So do you think that was like almost like a dominance thing?
yeah, it's like I currently have when I moved my emperor tetras into this fish tank, like I had about 10 of them. I bought an extra 5 just to get a little bit of genetic diversity, because I saw that it was possible to breed them.
Yeah.
And then I moved them into this tank, and I went from like 15 emperor tetras to, I don't know, my current best guess is between 70 and 100.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, like as far as tetras go, emperor tetras are like the guppies of the tetra world. Like
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Interesting. Are they your favorite tetra, or just happen to be
to
one
some
of the ones?
degree, yes. I'm not sure if it's mainly the thing that like I just keep seeing babies popping up.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other day when I did the water change, I saw like this 3 millimeter long fish where the only place where it had pigment was in the eyes. The rest of the tiny little fish is completely see-through, and you like after the water change, you just kind of see it darting around in like the undergrowth and whatnot.
Yeah, that's
But
cool.
like I don't know if it would be necessarily my favorite tetra, but like it's up there. I really, really enjoy keeping them, and as with any animal, breeding them just gives like an extra little bit of satisfaction to keeping them, because you get like the whole life cycle, not just this animal is here now and that's kind of it.
There is something quite special about that. Like I've only experienced it once, and that's it so far. But even then, I don't know, it's just cool. It's just something about it where you're just like, it's because obviously it's not really something you experience that often, I guess. I mean, I guess it depends what you keep. If you've got guppies or mollies or something like that, you probably get fed up of producing babies. But I know what you're saying, and it is cool. Obviously, the only example I've got is royal pythons, which the less said about that, the better.
I don't
But
know.
I know what
I
you're saying.
really enjoy royal pythons. It's that they're overbred is not their fault. They are a
Yeah, of
cool
course.
ass snake.
Yeah, of
They
course.
are cool, and like even like not considering even the conditions that they're bred in and whatnot, but they are a cool species of snake.
Yeah.
And also all the morphs. It's really interesting.
I love them. Like I'm a really big fan of them. Like even though I am moving a load on, that's not because I don't like them. That's because the ones that I'm keeping, I want to give them the best life I can.
Yeah.
But they're still, I'll get because the ones that I'm keeping, they're very different in their own ways. One of them is a normal, but she's incredible. She's my biggest female. She's beautiful. She's in a 4-foot enclosure, and she uses a lot. My favorite one, I know you're not meant to have favorites, is my pinstripe pied male. He's incredible. He's so personable. Like
Yeah.
honestly, he's the one that's getting this Viv that I was mentioning earlier on that I'm building. He's getting this one because every time I see him at the front of this plastic box, it breaks my heart. So obviously, I'm an impatient man at the best of times, as you know. Like when I'm trying to build stuff, I like getting
this.
A
It's
to B.
legitimate to be impatient, in my opinion. Like, I'm impatient to give my royals some better conditions. It's perfectly legitimate to be impatient about that.
That's it, yeah. But it almost adds to it because even if it's something that isn't really much of a rush, I'm still like, but I want to do it in one day. So even like upgrading the Cresty enclosure with new plants and things like that. For me, I'm always like, I need to do it in one. I don't have to do it in one day, but in my head, I'm like, right, get it done. But with this, obviously, because I've had to do, paint wood stain and things like that, I haven't even measured for the glass yet because the Viv wasn't built. But I'm here going, I need to get it done. But I'm excited because, like I say, every time I see him up there, I'm like, I'm getting him in this Viv. So obviously the video's coming soon, but it's just shy of 4 feet long, but it's quite deep. I'm pretty sure it's about 2 feet deep, and it's about 20 inches tall. So obviously, usually you get your 4x18x18 or your 4x2x2s. This is sort of a mix of both, and it looks already like I can already like picture him in there, and I'm buzzing. I'm so excited to get him in this Viv.
At the end of the day, we're all kind of restricted by our conditions, and at the end of the day, as long as you're striving to do better by the animal, if you've identified that, I'm not entirely cool with how I'm currently keeping my animal. I wanted to upgrade. It's like, first of all, it's very legit to be impatient about that, but on the other hand, like sometimes a little bit of patience is kind of required. But like that's also one of those things. If you're not trying to set up a bioactive reptile Viv, like if it doesn't need to be bioactive, you can kind of put the animal in there immediately, which is something where it kind of differentiates from fish tanks, in my opinion, because like good practice is to have the fish tank run at least like 2, 3, 4 weeks before you put any fish in there, and then only start stocking slowly. But on the other hand, you're putting more than one animal in there. Like for comparison, this fish tank is also pretty much 4 feet wide. It's like a sort of diamond-shaped corner aquarium, but like the big diagonal is 1.20 meters, 4 foot ish, and I don't know, like the biggest fish in here is 10 centimeters.
Yeah.
A little bit over if you count the streamers of the whiptail catfish that I got in here.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, it's incredible fish. Even though they don't move much, but they just look fascinating. They bury in the sand. They're not the best cleaners, to be perfectly honest. But they just hang around, and they're incredible to look at. Like such clumsy swimmers. Like incredible.
that's one of my favorite things about the fish keeping hobby is the diversity of fish that you can get. And also with having them, obviously you got to try and keep it communal if you're going to have loads of species of fish. But you've got your bottom dwellers. So for example, I've got bronze cories that just sift through the sand. You've got your fish that swim in sort of the middle of the tank. I've got at the minute pearl gourami. I've got a couple of bristlenose, and it's nice because you've got a bit of interest in every level. I've got some snails in there as well. The what's it called? Is it the rabbit ear snail? I think it is that I've got. The one with the really long shell. It's really cool, but that came out.
It's like the trumpet snail, but much bigger.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, they're really cool.
I think I've had one of those before.
But that's what's quite cool about that is like you can have all of this diversity, but in one space. Because obviously with reptiles, you can't really keep, for example, a roughneck monitor and then whack a royal python in there. It doesn't really work like that.
Yeah. This is one of those things I've kind of thought about because, like, honestly, I'd be lying if I wouldn't say that I'm extremely interested in getting a reptile in the fairly near future. And chances are it's going to be some kind of monitor lizard.
Okay.
Honestly, this is one of those things where I'm personally kind of undecided because at the end of the day, the ones that really fascinate me, I gotta be honest, are the tree monitors. Like the vibrant colors, the intelligence, and like because I'm starting off from a point where I've personally kind of trained myself off the impulse to keep buying new stuff just through my fish tanks because I gotta buy new food for my fish once a month or something like that. And like I always walk around the fish store and like, that would work well and this would work well. And it's kind of crazy. But it's also very good once your fish tanks get too full, you slowly start to realize that maybe I should slow down. And I think that's where fish keeping is in some degrees also really good because it's not one enclosure per animal. Like the fish tank behind me, it's 350 liters and it easily has 120 or 130 fish in it. Easily. Probably a few more. And it's like if you have a rough idea what the fish are like, you can combine all sorts of stuff. Like having 130 reptiles, if you're lucky, if you're really lucky, if you got really communal species, that's 15, 20 vibs. If you're lucky. More realistically, that's 50 vibs.
And we're talking by that like morning geckos where they basically clone themselves on a daily basis almost. Because obviously you do see, for example, communal. Let's just go with tree monitors, for example. You can get 2 to 3 tree monitors in the same enclosure. It's quite a big enclosure, though. And even then, sometimes
at the same time, you always kind of want to have like some sort of opportunity to separate one animal.
Yes.
With fish, just because because that's the thing where like for me personally, like fish keeping, the tank behind me is 120 centimeters. The biggest fish in my fish tank is 12 centimeters. Give or take. So we're talking 10 times the body length, like full body length of the animal, fins and everything. And to some degree, when I'm getting a reptile, this is like 10x is kind of hard to do unless you're getting some Gillonai or But like 5x, like 5 times the total body length of whatever animal I'm getting is something I kind of want to strive for, even if it's just a singular Eki that had to be rehomed. Because honestly, this is another one of those things. Like my favorite tetra, I can buy it for less than $3.
Yeah.
They're an awesome fish. They breed readily, and doesn't matter what kind of reptile I'm going to end up getting, it's going to be the most expensive animal I've ever bought.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I don't know, I think my woodtail catfish were like 15 euros a piece, and at least for me personally, that was extraordinarily expensive.
Yeah.
And like, except for maybe some morning geckos, what kind of like captive bred animal can you get for $15? Like, isn't really out there.
No.
Maybe a normal royal python, which, to be fair, it's an awesome snake, and honestly, to some degree, to this day, I'm still interested in keeping one. Just because, like, when I was a kid, like everybody else, I was interested in dinosaurs, interested in reptiles, and my parents would take me to this reptile zoo that was like half an hour, or something like that away. And they would always have these shows where they also like just give little kids the chance to like interact with like a royal python, have it around their neck and whatnot. And I don't know, I literally, like, I think there were times where me and my parents went there like once a month.
Yeah,
and
nice.
I was there. I was like, oh yeah, there's the snake show thing, and I can get like snake around my. It was part of that. Like every time I had the chance, basically. And so it's like to some degree, like I've interacted with them, and it's interacting with reptiles is so cool. Be they wild and you just kind of randomly run into them, or in captivity, because like where I'm at, the only real reptile we have is I think the grass snakes, the ones with the like bright pattern around their neck. I think they're grass snakes in English.
I'm probably the wrong person, even though I'm sat here called Riddler Reptiles and all the bannering. I'm not very clued up on the native species, which is quite bad, to be fair. And I'm going to be getting grilled in the comments for this, but I'm just going to agree and say,
the one with the like bright band around the neck.
Yeah.
We also got them here in like places where we go swimming regularly. They got a solid population of those snakes, and like in summer, occasionally it's like this 200-meter wide lake, and you'll just see one of those like cross the entire length of the lake.
Excellent.
Like nothing. It's incredible to see. But again, this is one of those things where I'm like, it's an incredible species, but am I really sure I want to keep this sort of animal in captivity? Because like it's a 100 or like 50-meter wide lake, and this thing just kind of crosses this whole lake in like 1 minute or whatever. Just like it's just indicates to me maybe this is an animal it's just better left in the wild. Like there's, especially in Germany, there's fuck all predators, and maybe they can get used to a small environment, but honestly, I'd rather to some degree see them like, just swim a couple 100 meters across a lake or whatever. And I don't know, this is one of those things where it's like, you know what they are, what kind of range they have in captivity just on their own. But on the other hand, I'm also kind of convinced that if this snake doesn't need to travel several kilometers a day to like get its food, or even several 100 meters across a lake where there are several species of fish that would, if they're big enough to eat it, they might realistically just go for it.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where it's like, especially with royal pythons, do I consider a rack appropriate? No. But to some degree, like if we're looking at ancient humans, we used to be hunter-gatherers. Lord knows how many kilometers on average a human would travel in a day just to get their fill of food that they require.
Mm-hmm.
And to some degree, I think that's same with any reptile. Yes, they will travel several kilometers in a day in order to try to find some food. But just like humans, if you get a supermarket down the street, why the fuck would I travel any further? Realistically,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
the one thing in nature is being efficient.
Yeah.
Being efficient with your resources. If you can satisfy the same demand while traveling 3 meters versus 300 meters, you got a way lower chance that on the way some predator finds you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
at least to my mind, to some degree, just the absence of predators, just the fact that an animal is in a safe environment. Do they have less freedom to move around? Yes, but to what degree is that freedom more of a necessity of the environment? And I'm not sure there is like a solid answer because, yeah, it depends on the species. It depends on how much the
Yeah, of
species
course.
wants to move or whatever. But
Yeah, yeah.
at the end of the day, it's always like, yeah, humans used to travel, I don't know how many kilometers per day, and we happily swap that for going to the supermarket. And
Well,
to some
sometimes
degree, I
now
think,
we don't even go to the supermarket. Sometimes we get the supermarket to come to us.
yeah, it's called efficiency. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think animals do kind of work in a similar way that if their basic needs are being met in a certain place, they're not necessarily going to move anywhere else. Because why would they? If you can
Yeah.
drink and eat and even have a mate in the same 10 square meters,
Mm-hmm.
why the fuck would you go anywhere else? Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's like today. If I didn't need to either walk the dog or take and pick up my son from nursery, I wouldn't have left the house. I had no need to leave the house apart from those two things.
yeah,
Well, like, because like I say, I've got my food here, I've got my drink here, things like that. So, I mean, obviously, the other, obviously, the flip side to that when we talk about racks is at least I had the freedom to go upstairs or downstairs or the garden, as opposed to just being chucked in the bathroom for the day. You know what I mean? So that's where
that's one of the things that kind of irks me a little bit about snake keeping in general, because, like, to me, snakes are the only animal where it is even like theoretically acceptable to keep the animal in an enclosure that is the same length as the animal or smaller.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the only animal I can think of.
Yeah.
Mice, lizards, fish, dogs, cats, like with any other animal, everybody would be like, yo, you got like a half-meter long dog. Why the fuck is it in a 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter cube?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and with snakes, it's, and like to some degree they're just long and skinny. It's not the same dimensions as a dog, but
yeah.
I keep feeling a little bit weird about that. If I'm perfectly honest, it's like, yeah, it's like if I would keep one of these tetras in, I don't know, like a fucking test tube or something.
Yeah.
And
or it's like when when it was quite popular to have a Siamese fighting fish in a cup or a vase.
yeah,
You have it like this big.
the exact same thing. And there, it's like the cup is still 2 or 3 times the length of the
Yeah. So even they still had it better than some royals. Yeah, you're right.
And
But for a while, people look at that and they go, "Yeah, well, it's all they need." But the problem is that you're taking choice out of it. If you were to put, because obviously the myth with the Siamese fighting fish was they live in rice paddies where they live in puddles that are only about this big. It's all they need. But that wasn't, they don't live in a singular hole by choice. It just happens to be when the water rises and falls and things like that. If the fish had access to an entire, let's say, ecosystem where it could swim for miles, it's going to go for that. You know,
Yeah, of course.
with a royal, if you put a royal in a box and you say they don't need the space to move, I've never seen it move, well, that's because it can't. I have seen the 2 royals that I've currently got in Vivs. I promise you, every single night I come in here, I've said this before, they're in different places. So the one at the bottom down here, I can guarantee you that I'll find him not only on the other side of his Viv, but he will have climbed up the sticks that I've put for him to climb on, and he'll just be sat there chilling.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to set up a night vision camera or something soon, just to see just how active he is at night. Because, like I say, he will be up there. He'll be down, you know, at the bottom under his hide. He goes all over the place, and that's because he can. He's got the choice to do so. You know, it's all well and good saying, "Oh, my snakes don't move." That's because they can't. That's what I mean. So it's crazy. Yeah. And like you say, if someone was to go online and say, "This is my," I don't know. Let's continue with tree monitors. This is my tree monitor. I've got it in a 3-foot enclosure. They're gonna get grilled. They are going to get dragged through the mud, and they're just going to be shunned by everyone. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's when, like, I don't know, like, especially with tree monitors, I think you usually find that most of the people that keep them are like fairly advanced. That like most of the people that keep a tree monitor are also capable of pulling off things like cohabitating, which is not necessarily a given with reptiles, just because most reptiles aren't necessarily social. Doesn't mean that they don't have ways to interact with other individuals of their species. And like there is definitely some sort of communications, but overall the tendency for reptiles is fuck you, got mine. Like it's just very individualistic animals.
Well, so this is the thing, like where you say like they're advanced, obviously, because the thing is, only if you're into reptiles are you going to spend 1,500 to 2,000, if not more, on a singular lizard. But this is why you very rarely see things like tree monitors that are in substandard enclosures and things like that. But at the same time, on the other side, that's why you see so many, for example, Bosch monitors that you can pick up for £30 when they're this big, and they grow to a big size. That's why you see them in shit enclosures that are too small. It's because they go, "Oh, I'd love a monitor. That's really cheap. That's really, I could do that. 30 quid. It's only 30 quid. That's why you get so many that are fat and dying and in substandard enclosures. That's the problem.
This is one of those things where also, like, because, like, I've basically looked into getting a reptile for years. And honestly, there were times where the reptile I actually wanted to get changed like every 3 days. Because there's just so much cool stuff out there. Like, I don't know, there's like, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000, 1,500, whatever, I don't know, at least over 1,000 different species of lizard out there. Like, where are you going to keep them all?
And this is one of the problems that I think we've discussed before, is we always do want, I tell you what, I really like that one. Let me get one of them. Oh, that's really cool. I want to get one of them. I'm guilty of it. I'm definitely guilty of it. You know, I see these animals, like I got the blue tongue skink recently. All right, there's a bit of a backstory with that.
Damn, I love Dobbies so much.
They're incredible. Oh, mate, Dobby's a legend. Honestly, he's such a legend. But obviously, there's history behind why I got that. And I always wanted one, but it's only because it was Dobby that I went for him now. But still, there's the times where you're just like, that's cool. I'd love one of those. It's like at the minute, I'd love some garter snakes. I have no room for them at the minute. There is literally, unless I manage to convince the missus to let me have the conservatory, which we're getting there slowly but surely, I have no room for any more. Like the only room I've got is being filled with new Vivs, with current snakes, which obviously is good. But it's one of those hobbies where And like you say, it's dangerous because you can't have them all in one enclosure. But you see them and you go, "That's cool. I want one of those as well."
Yeah.
Where are you going to put a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 foot enclosure every time you want a new reptile?
Yeah, because like for me personally, that's kind of the plan. I want to get kind of my own flat and basically, I don't know, just get like 1/3 of the living room to build basically one with like little side enclosures where I
Yeah,
can breed like feeder insects and that
yeah,
sort of thing. Just
yeah,
to like get the whole thing sort of self-sufficient starting from the beginning, and only like once I got, I don't know, maybe some crickets, some roaches, some mealworms breeding,
yeah.
only then am I gonna start to think about what actual animal I want to put into my bed. Because like because this is one of those things. Like I've always kept fish, so to me, not being able to touch the animals just isn't a big deal to me. But
Yeah.
honestly, to some degree, if I'm gonna devote such a big part of like my living room to the habitat of one animal, I kind of want to interact with it.
Yeah, of
And
course.
for that, just from the conditions, like the sort of Odetria monitors are probably better just because they don't need it superhuman. Like
Mhm.
you don't get to the point where you get problems with a bunch of stuck shit just because you let them run around your room for like 3 hours. At least to some degree that what the tree monitors sometimes seem like to me, because I don't know, from what I understand from like Paul, there's even with the localities of green tree monitors, there's like
Yes.
differences. And
Yeah, yeah.
to me, honestly, the main reason I'm probably not going to get a green tree monitor in the near future is not because I don't want one, but just because 1.5 grand for a single animal, it's just not a price I'm willing to accept under any circumstances. Like, too
It's a
much,
lot. It's a lot.
period. Like,
Now, the thing is, if I had the room and I had the money and I had the time and the space and all of that, I would happily drop that much money on a singular animal. But it's not feasible. It's not doable because the thing is, an amount of money like that, especially in the situation I'm in. Obviously, I've got a mortgage. I've got a child. I've got another child on the way.
yeah,
Childcare is basically a mortgage in itself. So we're basically
of
paying two
course.
mortgages at the minute. It's not feasible. It's not like I can put £10 a month away and all of a sudden it'll take me years. It's not happening. Like, and so that's like you say, that's the difference. If time, money, space was no object, happily, but as it stands, I could not justify like 15 plus £100 on a tree monitor.
Like that's the thing. I don't even want these guys to be 50 quid a piece. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I'm saying. But
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
end
of
of
course.
the day, there is for me always this balance that like having animals come in too cheap realistically is not going to be good for the animal,
Of course.
especially if we're talking about an animal that's going to live 10, 15, 20, or maybe even more years
Mm-hmm.
if you actually keep care of it correctly.
Yeah.
But this is like one of those things where it's always like it's all kind of related to money, and I think the tree monitors are still in the state of you can actually make a lot of money with them. If
Mm-hmm.
you get two pairs breeding, if they give you one clutch each, 4 eggs that are successful
Mm-hmm.
between two pairs,
Mm.
that's 12 grand a year.
That's not bad. That's
That's
not
some
bad at all.
decent fucking money. Like that's some decent money. But
Mm.
on the other hand, like I don't know, for me personally, because like I'm lucky in that like I've kept fish for ages and I kind of know what I want in my animals,
Hmm.
because this is one of those things. This is another thing I don't get about, let's call it mainstream reptile keeping, you get this dry box with like some shavings of wood at the bottom and like a cave, and it's like, I don't know, I might as well just get a shelf with some books in it, and it's gonna be less maintenance and it's gonna look equally as good. Just a little bit less movement.
Yeah.
Because, like, for me personally, I'm not sure exactly what kind of environment my fish come from, but at the end of the day, they're from some sort of water. They want some sort of cover and whatnot. But like, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but there's like literally no hardscape, or at least like tall hardscape in my fish tank.
Yeah.
And it's all little plants and like moss and crypticorns. Like I gave this thing a trimming the other day, so otherwise it would be like way more overgrown.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where I'm like, I love looking at the enclosure, not just the fish.
Yeah.
The whole thing has an aesthetic to it. It adds something to the room. I like looking at it. I like tweaking things in it. And this is one of the things I really don't get about reptile keeping. If you get like this wooden box with some wood shavings and like a snake in it, what? Like, that's not how I would be approaching having an enclosure of any animal. Because to me, the aesthetic part, to me personally, is a very important part of the whole thing. Because if I don't, like, I have 2 fish tanks currently. One contains fish that I, almost all of them universally very much enjoy. And I got one fish tank where I got a bunch of fish that, like, I'm in the process of getting myself to give them to the fish store so I can maybe do a restocking with fish I actually like. Because I have fish in there that I really enjoy, but all the other fish kind of suppress them. And just because of that, I don't like looking at it as much, which means the fish tank doesn't get as much care, which means it doesn't look as good, which again means it doesn't get as much care as the other one.
And vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle.
That's always one of those things where, like, at least for me personally, I got to be honest with myself. I have to look at this thing. And unless I like looking at this thing, I'm not going to pay it much attention. Even though the animals in there very much deserve it. And like, that's the thing with fish tanks. The way I got them set up, they're like an aquatic jungle. I cannot do a water change for a month and all the fish are going to be fine. Like, the way these things are dirted up, I don't know, I can go on holiday for a week and everything's going to be fine. Like, I don't even need to ask anyone if there's going to be enough food. I just feed them a lot more the week before, and by the time they've gotten rid of the fish have gotten rid of their extra fat, like, I'm back from holiday. And
see, this is the thing. I mean, because I completely agree with you. But this is why when I got something, so for example, the crested gecko, they are pretty much one of the first things you learn about them is they are predominantly nocturnal. Obviously, they can be crepuscular and all that, but you're not going to see them during the day unless you get lucky that you get one that likes exploring during the day or basking. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be asleep and hidden. So I looked at that and I thought, all right, but I still want to be able to look at something. That's why you go for, it doesn't have to be bioactive, but naturalistic, bioactive. You fill it with plants, you make a nice background, you just, you light it up, you make it a centerpiece. So even if you can't see that animal, it's still something to look at and enjoy and appreciate. Because like you say, if you've just got a box with nothing in it apart from a little hide, no one's going to want to look at that. Not even you're going to want to look at that. Whereas at least this way you can go, oh, these plants are coming in quite nice. I mean, if you're me, you can look at them and go, oh, these plants are dying again, but we'll get into that.
I got a few theories on the whole plant thing, but we're going to get to that. But one of the things I've kind of thought about, because like, again, this is one of those things where I'm going more from like being a fish keeper. There's a bunch of fish that are generally like either they are more used to living undercover or in like darker conditions, and a lot of times having a part of the fish tank that's just dark, where they can remain completely hidden underneath something, because I feel like especially with smaller fish, a lot of their comfort comes from having overhead cover, just so nothing can like come and snatch them from up top. I think this is one of those things where they instinctually will feel a little bit more safe, at least from what I've seen in my fish tanks.
Yeah.
And the other thing is with like animals that generally tend to prefer darker conditions, just having like a really dark corner where they like just like a stack of things where like they can forage around and whatnot, and even if the light is beaming down from up top, they got this little dark spot, even if it's a nocturnal animal. I'm not sure which video it was, but when you did an LED upgrade for one of the royals, it was like deep in shed, and before that it was just kind of chilling on the more cool side under a log, because like the overall width was pretty dark and it was just kind of chilling. And like, this is obviously just one tiny little window that I got into the life of the snake. But like, as the LED came on, the deep blue animal realized, oh shit, it's kind of bright, I have to go into a cave. And before that, it was just kind of chilling out in the open. And after that, it went to, and after the LED came on, it went into a cave. And I kept thinking, yeah, if you get like a nocturnal animal, having one really bright side with the UV, with high lumens that actually mimic like a diurnal sort of situation, but having like a third of the width just kind of stacked up bark or whatever, and just so you have like this really dark place. If it feels like moving around in the dark during the day, it can, and maybe you'll catch like some glimpses of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, like this, maybe some royals will use it, maybe some won't. But this is one of those things that I wondered, because like this one snake was just in the more dim light, it was just kind of chilling out in the open, and then as the lights came on, it was like, oh shit, it's way too bright. So, like, and then it went underground. And now my lights went off.
Yeah, I know the exact one you're on about. That was the big royal that I've got, the big female.
The first one that got an upgrade.
That's it. Now, the thing is that LED has since come out of there because I think it was making the whole enclosure too hot. I've actually removed it. She has got overhead heat and UVB. And in that same corner that you saw her in the beginning of that video, that's where she spends a lot of her time, to be fair.
Yeah.
There are times I'll come in and she's in the hot hide, in the cave and things like that. But this is what we're saying, whether it's fish or reptiles, like you were saying, you can have a corner of the fish tank that even when the lights are on, it's maybe covered in plants. It's got a rock stack. It's got bogwood. You're giving them that choice to feel safe. If they feel like they need to avoid predation, if they feel like they need to avoid conflicts and things like that, you're giving them that choice. And it doesn't matter whether it's a tetra that's 3 centimeters long or a 4 to 5 foot royal. Giving them choice is the best thing you can do for any animal. That's one of the things that I've come to learn actually quite quickly. Like it's one of them, like, you look at it and you go, yeah, but why wouldn't you give them that choice? Because people go, oh, why would I give a snake a big space if he's not going to use it? well, in case he wants to use it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not up to you to decide how big, how small a space this snake can, because otherwise it's like saying, oh, my cat sleeps 18 hours a day, so I'm just going to keep it in the cat carrier all day.
Yeah, it's not how it works.
It's not how it works at all. Like my cats today, luckily for me, because they do annoy me, they spent pretty much all day asleep next to each other on our bed on a space that's, sort of this big. It's like me looking at that and going, well, they don't need space, do they?
But
They
if
do.
they can't move when they want to, all hell breaks loose.
Exactly.
And like cats are very good at just kind of messaging that, and they're gonna fuck up your flat if they can.
Yeah. I mean, mine let me know as well. I mean, they're vocal at the best of times, so if they're annoyed, they definitely let me know. But this is it. Like I say, whether it's fish, snakes, lizards, cats, dog, whatever it is, it's about giving them that choice and that option.
Yes, very much. And like this is honestly, this is something I've only started to understand, like because like for fish, I don't know. I've been keeping fish for over 20 years at this point. I don't know. I was like 5 or 6 when I got my first fish tank. It had some like crayfish in there, and it was like this 20 or 30 liter tiny little box. The crayfish ate all the plants I put in there, so it looked ugly as fuck. So I didn't really take care of it, and I don't know. It was kind of weird. I barely even fed it initially, but there was always some crayfish in there. They kept reproducing somehow. To this day, I don't fucking know. And I don't know. There were instances where they managed to crawl out of that fish tank and like into my parents' bedroom and whatnot. Kind of crazy. It's kind of sad because like once you've crawled 15 meters or 10 meters out of the tank, what's gonna happen? It's gonna dry out. So by the time it was found, but I still remember that. I don't know, I was like 6 or 7, and my parents were like, "Yo, we found a crayfish in front of our bed this morning." Like, and then it's like, "Oh, okay."
It's not something you expect to come out or like go to bed and see sat outside your door, is it? No.
Well, they showed me. It was like literally said, like it crawled under the door and then just right in front of the bed. It kind of stopped and unfortunately died. But it was still like I remember to this day because it was a little bit sad, but also very much hilarious. Like,
well, I mean, you've carried it with you for what, like you say, 20 years or so. So it's definitely a memorable story, that's for sure.
But it's another one of those things because I had those crayfish for like a year, 2 years, maybe a little bit longer, somewhere around there. And then my dad got me my first like 60-centimeter fish tank and some fish in there. I was able to keep plants. And I took much better care of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Just because it wasn't no longer like a couple of rocks with a bunch of brown slime on top of it. It was an actual fish tank with light, with movement in it constantly. Something I could get interested in whenever I felt like it and whatnot. And that actually sparked my interest into like keeping a fish tank long term. And basically the only time since then I hadn't actually kept a fish tank was when I went to New Zealand, even though like my parents were still kind of taking care of the fish tank. And once I got set up here where I'm technically still currently studying, like once I got my fish tank over here, then like I got a little bit more into that, even though I don't know, like a year after I set up the tank over here where I'm studying, I had a horrendous disease outbreak in the one fish tank I had at that time. Like it had been like half a year since I had bought new fish. So it
Yeah.
wasn't that I just imported something from like some new fish.
Yeah.
Started
Oh,
one
okay.
day, one fish was swimming kind of weird and not able to like keep the balance and whatnot, and kept swimming upside down. And yeah, the same pattern of disease basically killed out of the 40, 50 fish I had at that time. I had like 6 remaining when everything was said and done within like 3
Wow.
days.
Blimey,
And
okay.
like I've gotten to the point where I have a rough idea which disease that might have been,
Mm-hmm.
because I still have it in both my tanks.
Right,
But
okay.
I don't know, something in the parameters seems to have gone so far out of whack at that point that the fish were susceptible to the
Right.
disease.
Okay.
Now, when I see it, I think the common name is like fish tuberculosis, which
Oh,
is,
blimey, okay.
um, which interestingly enough is not only like one of the main killers of aquarium fish, as far as I understand. Like from a study I've read, it's like over 50% of all aquarium fish that die from this specific bacteria. Like
Blimey, okay.
over half. And
Yeah.
it's hard to treat with antibiotics. And it's a disease that can technically like infect humans. Like you're gonna get a skin rash from it. But it's still
Yeah.
a disease that can be transferred from a fish to a human.
Wow, okay.
And it's like I I know for a fact that I have this disease floating around in both my tanks, because on the occasion I'll still see one of the way too many fish that I've got in both of them, because like you have these recommendations. Like I think in Germany what you usually run into is 1 centimeter per 2 liters, or
Yeah.
like the Americans do, like the 1 inch per gallon sort of
Yeah,
rule.
yeah. Yeah.
Like with both my fish tanks, I am less than 1 centimeter per liter.
Right,
Like
okay.
I have so many fish in there.
Mm.
Like as I said, I started out with like 15 emperor tetras, and now my best guess is between 70 and 100. And that's anywhere between 3 millimeters long and like the full grown males.
Yeah.
Um, like I honestly have no idea. And at the same time, people keeps taking, you have to change water and shit. I know what my water is doing.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to, I can change water every 3 months.
Wow, okay.
The quality of the water is kept kind of constant. I think the main difference is just that over time you're gonna get much higher bacterial density in there, which also isn't necessarily good. But like just from nitrates, I think my nitrates never really go over 40, 50 parts per million, which is so far from a lethal dose.
Yeah.
Because like you can have fish in much higher nitrate conditions, and it's just not going to matter. Because at the end of the day, like fish growth, yes, water quality plays a role, but at the end of the day, in fish growth, similar to reptiles, the more food they have available, the quicker they grow. If you
Mm.
feed them once a day, they will grow slower. If the same baby fish will grow slower if you feed them once a day compared to feeding them 3 or 4 times a day. But it
Yeah.
will also worsen your water quality. And so it's kind of a balance. Like I'm just oopsing my emperor tetras. They like I literally can't make them stop breeding. I was in
Yeah.
I was in Serbia for a month earlier this year, and it was literally like I came back. I had 6 new babies that I kind of come up to the size where the adults wouldn't eat them anymore.
Right. Okay.
And it's.
I mean, well, like you say, that's not your like you can't, because it's different when you've got reptiles. It's up to you 9 times out of 10 to put the male and female together.
Yeah.
You can't really separate, or not easily anyway, your male and female emprotectors in the fish tank.
I could.
A little bit more difficult. You could.
I definitely, but why the fuck would I? Like,
yeah. So have you found that obviously keeping quiet, because as we saw and as you've said, like they're quite heavily planted tanks. Do you find that has played quite a major role in helping your water quality? Because they do feed off of the nitrates, don't they?
Yeah, they like without the tanks and like not only the aesthetic part where I'm like, yeah, I want the plants in there just so I like looking at it, but also, yeah, like my dad used to have a fish tank as well, and like in there we kept some African cichlids.
Nice.
And honestly, it's another one of those animals. I freaking love the colors.
Yeah.
But I can't keep plants in there, so
Yeah.
like I'm not as interested,
Yeah.
because to me the fish are just one part of the setup of the fish tank.
Yeah.
The fish need to harmonize with the overall concept, and with cichlids, unless it's like some sort of a nubia or like some really tough plant, they're just gonna fucking eat it. And so you can only have like these rock escarpments, which you can make look nice, but by that time your fish tank weighs probably 3.5 tons.
Yeah. See, this is the problem we've sort of got with our tank at the minute. We were actually planning on, because I did have a marine set up for a little while. It was money was going into it and nothing was working. So we decided, because of the situation we're in, we'll just go back to tropical for a little while. We'll try marine again in a few years' time if we can. And the initial idea was to go for African cichlids. I love the Malawi cichlids. They're incredible. And obviously I know, as you know, like you've just said, you can't really keep them with plants because they'll just eat them and smash them up and it won't look nice. So I kept the same sand from the marine setup. Obviously I cleaned it, the same rock, just cleaned it up, just, you know, all of that. But then I was told by a friend of mine, obviously he'll be on here, he might be watching, but Michael basically said that my fish tank might have been too small for African cichlids. It's 180 litres.
It's
he said it might. It's probably borderline. I think if I had a bigger filter, maybe. But it's not. I think I've got the Fluval 206 or 7, I think. But if I had a bigger filter, then potentially. But yeah, so he said, obviously, maybe don't go cichlid. So luckily, at this point, I actually did listen to some advice. I was like, all right, fair enough. If it's not big enough, it's not big enough. But I'd already set it up. So it was like, I can't really put new substrate. Oh, I could do, but I'm also quite lazy. I was like, I'm just going to keep it as it is. I don't need that many plants. But now I look at it and I'm like, I've only got sand in there. I don't know if I was to get some plants, I don't know how well they do in just sand. I would need some sort of like aquarium substrate, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
It's
some degree, yes. But on the other hand, if you're not too crazy about vacuuming out all the dirt, over time you'll get a solid bacterial colony and a stash of not really mobile nutrients in the sand as well. But it all takes time. Like the fish tank behind me, it's like 2-ish inches of sand, and underneath that is like this really nutrient dense layer. And it's a method I kind of found on YouTube, because the other one just has gravel at the bottom, and some plants work well in there, some plants don't. And there's definitely a difference. Can you see this up here?
Yeah.
It's a plant that's grown 0.5 meter outside of my tank, like from the bottom. Like from
That's
down
cool.
here to up here. This motherfucker is like 1 meter tall. And
that's really cool.
But the thing is, for the longest time, this very plant used to be like this tall, maybe like
Mm-hmm.
10, 15 centimeters. And like this tank has been set up for 3 years now. 2.5, maybe 2 years of those 3 years, this plant was in there and was like 10, 15 centimeters tall. Eventually, it started getting some bigger leaves. And yeah, then it started producing the dry leaves. And now it's just completely out of control. Like, to the point where I'm like, yeah, do I still want to keep this plant? Because like it's my sleeping room, especially in winter. I get like all fogged up windows just because I can't properly close my fish tank because the fucking plant has to stick out somewhere.
To be fair, I spotted that earlier on, and it does look cool. I mean, I can only imagine it is a bit of a nuisance not being able to shut the lid, but it does look quite cool.
It's extremely cool. I love looking at it, but on the other hand, like just the fact that I know how this plant is growing now, and I had several plants where it was just because I had this nutrient-rich layer underneath.
Mm-hmm.
It took forever for the soil to get properly established. But I also did it kind of in a DIY sort of fashion. I could have had just like probably some professional aqua soil sort of stuff, and that would have probably sped up the whole thing, because I initially had a huge anoxic zone at the bottom of the sand where like here at the edge, like in the morning, the sun kind of shines in on the side of the sand, and I could literally see like different sorts of photosynthetic sulfur oxidizing bacteria just growing on the side here, like literal layers, like green and purple and brown and all sorts of different things. And I think after about half a year, this fucking tank would rip a fart every now and then.
Yeah.
Like the first time this happened, because like I used dry sand, so there was a lot of gases still trapped in the lower layers of the sand initially.
Yeah.
And at some point, there was just so much like sulfur, just like sulfur compounds, basically, that would gas out. And like the first time this happened, like I just heard this bloop 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 from my fish tank, and I was like, where the fuck did that come from? And I went there, and like, it was such a horrendous stench. Like,
yeah.
And this continued for like 3-4 months until all the gas had kind of gotten out.
Yeah.
And yeah, now it's kind of stabilized. But at the same time, it was just because the lower 2/3 of the substrate were just completely devoid of oxygen. And I had plants that were in like the top 2 or 3 centimeters of the substrate. The roots looked all perfect. The plants were growing perfectly. But as soon as the roots tried to dip further down, all rotten and black. And I lost a bunch of plants to that. So just because there was such a high nutrient density further down, it was... Yeah, it's... and this is one of those things where, like, normally aquatic plants have ways of transport, because like roots need oxygen. Even aquatic plants roots need oxygen, but normally aquatic plants have ways to get oxygen down to the roots through their tissue, which a lot of like terrestrial plants don't, which is something we can touch on shortly, because it's one of those where you can over and underwater your plant, and this is kind of the case with almost every nutrient that they need. But when your soil gets to a point where when the roots go too deep, the roots literally fucking dissolve.
Right, okay.
That was the case for over half a year in my fish tank. And like a lot of plants were still growing. They don't care. They just had shallow roots. And now that the substrate is more oxygenated overall, or at least more mixed through, the trumpet snails have properly dug through, and
Yeah.
now there's a little bit more substance exchange, and now it works. And now I have, like, the last 1.5 years have been more plant growth, and I know what to do with.
Okay.
Like, I had an Amazon sword in there, also like 15 centimeters, and I finally ripped it out when it had 2 runners with, like, I don't know, like 10 plants on it that went around the edge of the tank, like twice in total.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 330 liters. The individual leaves were like 60, 70 centimeters long. This motherfucker took up most of the water volume in the fish
Yeah.
tank. Just this one plant. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of crazy to see, like, this initial sort of stunted growth and then just
Exploded.
exploding. But yeah, this is one of those things where with aquariums you need to be patient. Eventually, if you don't clean your tank too religiously, if you, like, especially the mold at the bottom of a fish tank, for me personally, it's one of the most important things that you can have in a fish tank, because these are the bacteria that not only break down fish poop, but they also, along with the algae, kind of keep the whole ecosystem, the whole nutrient availability in check. Like, if there's one excess nutrients, the bacteria and the algae are usually the first to absorb it, versus like plants, they might take longer or just not need the nutrient that is there in excess at all.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of times like this balance of nutrients, and like the bacteria and algae are much more capable of adapting to that, because plants are a little bit more complex, even though, yeah, not that much more complex than some algae, let's say. It's just like sort of singular, not even that, like a lot of algae are multi-celled as well. Like, there's singular celled algae, but there's also, yeah, like pretty much like plants, but there's still a distinction to some degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, nature doesn't really do categories. That's something we came up with to sort of understand it. Yeah, it's like the chloroplast, like where the photosynthesis in the cell takes place. From what we understand, it's a cyanobacteria, like a what we now know as blue-green algae. It's one of those that was eaten by a different cell, managed to survive in there, and that's cyanobacteria that exists inside the cell was basically the first plant cell, so to speak, that we know of. Same with, like, I don't know, from school, mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Chances are, this was also one of those in early Earth's existence, where basically one bacteria ate another bacteria, and the bacteria managed to survive in there and also reproduce with the other bacteria. And this is one of those where it's like, first of all, how fucking long does it take for this to even happen? It's, and I don't know, like, for example, most of the iron in Australia is really old. Like, it was deposited a couple billion years ago as the Earth was kind of going through its oxygenation. But from what I understand, the oxygen to oxidize this much iron, because, like, before the great oxygenation event, we didn't have oxygen in the atmosphere. That shit is super reactive, and even if it occurs somewhere, it takes a very short time to just react with something else and to be gone again. Just the fact that we have oxygen in our atmosphere is pretty incredible. from like a chemical stance.
Yeah.
And the thing is, photosynthesis, we always understand, oh yeah, it produces oxygen. No. The photosynthesis part just means that you get energy from the sun to do something else. You can oxidize iron with that.
Mm-hmm.
You can use the sun's energy to basically kick an electron from some iron, and then you get rust. And this is one of those things where basically a lot of Australia was basically deposited because photosynthetic iron oxidizing bacteria deposited iron before any oxygen was involved at all. And like layers and layers, like we're talking billions of years of development, because multicellular life, as far as the Earth is concerned, is fairly recent. As far as I know, it's not even like multicellular life is barely 500 million years old, maybe a little bit older. And I'm not even sure scientists know full well like how old multicellular life itself is. But the Earth is 4 billion years old, and for most of that time we had life on here, and most of that time it was single-celled.
Mm-hmm.
So just this whole thing from like, first of all, getting to life in the first place, like, doesn't matter if it came here on an asteroid or if it actually developed here on our planet.
Yeah.
This, just for this shit to work, is incredible.
It is
complex.
It is.
And yeah, like, I'm a biochemist, and this is the kind of stuff that just keeps fascinating me. You get this like super complex setup that just kind of evolved. Just it started somewhere and then kept morphing into things, and now we have, I don't know, we have shrimps and elephants.
Yeah.
And it all from like one individual cell. It's incredible. If you,
it is. Do you know what?
even-
It's not really one of those things that you really think about that of like, well, me personally, it's not one of those things that comes to mind very often. But then when you talk about it and you sit there and you think about it, you go, fucking hell.
like,
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's just the, like, this is basically the part that I enjoy so much about science. It's just the general, like, every time you learn something, it tends to throw out 10 more questions.
Yes.
Because I understand one thing, and like, this one thing I understand. How did that came to be? What are the effects of this?
Mm-hmm.
It's an infinite rabbit hole, and every little aspect of science. It's like my master thesis was on the reactions of plants to rare earth elements, like neodymium, like from the magnets and stuff, and aluminium.
All right. Okay.
And it turns out, depending on the plant species, even though, as far as we know, none of those elements actually serve any proper function, you can still see positive effects of those elements that the plants, at least as far as we know, don't really need.
Yeah.
But under certain conditions, some plants still grow better if you add some of those metals into the water that you use to water them.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where it's like, over the last couple of years, the amount of elements that are kind of beneficial to plants, like the beneficial nutrients, the list keeps getting a lot of, like, fucking chromium. I studied chemistry, and chromium is like universally regarded as one of the most toxic fucking elements you can work with, as far as at least like just the general metal salts are concerned.
Yeah.
It's now classified as like a beneficial trace element. You want really low concentrations of it,
Of course. Yeah.
but it can still benefit plant growth.
Crazy.
And it's one of those things, like every time you learn something, it just keeps throwing up new questions. It's like, why the fuck does chromium help a plant, even though we are fairly sure, or at least we yet have to find any biological use for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like any plant is a highly complex biological entity that also cooperates with bacteria, with fungi, with other plants. And like if you're looking at a patch of grass, you're not looking at individual plants, you're looking at a biological network. Every single plant has, like especially alongside the roots, it has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of bacteria per centimeter of root. And you can have beneficial bacteria. You can have bacteria that don't really seem to do anything at all as far as we understand, and you have harmful bacteria. You have fungi that can infect the plant. It's the same with bacteria. But a lot of times you also have bacteria that kind of colonize the root, and they do like incredible stuff. I don't know, like clover and lupines, they have the possibility to form a symbiosis with bacteria where not only like the roots will grow extra sort of organs, like little bumps on the side of the root, which are literally only there for bacteria to live in. And these are nitrogen fixing bacteria, which basically means if the plant doesn't get enough nitrogen, the bacteria will literally get the nitrogen from the air. And in the process of living in this plant, the bacteria will also change their shape. Like you will have normal formed bacteria when the symbiosis starts.
Yeah.
And as they get more and more incorporated into the plant's roots, they go from this sort of oval classic bacterial shape into like these odd, angular, inconsistently shaped blobs. It's still the same bacteria. They still do the same things.
It's just adapting to its conditions, its survival, things like that, or all of the above.
Like they get phosphorus from the plant and they swap it for some nitrogen.
That's mad.
And that's literally just one example of the kind of things that plants do. And you don't even have to go this far where you like incorporate the bacteria into the root. Every single root is colonized by bacteria. And like the whole interactions between the plant, microbes, and the soil are infinitely complex. Like I've done my master thesis on this sort of topic, and like, holy shit. There's several rules, but just because soil is so different and the nutrient availability is so different and the microbiome is so different, there's things you can compare. And there's things where it's like, we have 25 factors that could be responsible for this development.
See, this is why I quite like the science side of things. It's because science is always questioning itself. It doesn't come up with
ideally it should be
definitive answer. It's not black and white. It's a case of, right, we've figured this out, but why? all right, this is the reason why for that, but how comes that's happened there? Now, I'm sure at some point you're there going, just give me the answer. Like, what is it? But sometimes it's not as simple as that.
Unfortunately, generally speaking, that's not how science works. If somebody claims to have the ultimate answer, that's not going to be a scientific answer, because any scientific answer comes with some caveats. As far as we know, to our current understanding and in the conditions that you have described to me, I think this is likely what is occurring.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't give you that, if there is no like doubt in their proclamation, I always find myself like, it doesn't matter the context. I know from science things are complicated.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And the more you know about something, the more questions you will inevitably ask, because that's one of those things of science. Every time you answer a question, if you do science right, you will have 10 more questions. And that's
it's almost like the more you learn and the more you figure out, the more you realize how little you know about it. Almost, it's like by learning more, you see how little you know. It's crazy.
Yeah, and especially with plants, it's like we can get a little bit into that now, but like basically, I think one of the main factors that, at least from the mixes that you and even Paul is doing, is it's missing one key ingredient. Either charcoal or clay. And for one very specific reason, because like the way Paul keeps talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, I throw out all my soil every like 1 month, 2 months. And it's like, soil needs a lot of time to settle down, like several months. Just when you've mixed it all together, when you got your, because like a normal soil will have 3 components. It will have the organics, which would be like your compost, that sort of thing. You would have your mineral component, like sand, rocks, that sort of thing. And then clay or charcoal, which you can kind of imagine as some sort of organic glue for nutrients. And basically what the clay or charcoal, they're both capable of doing that, but they will form chemical compounds, like highly complex stuff with the organic part. And not only will that preserve the soil to some degree, but it will also bind a lot of nutrients, which in turn slows down the growth of bacteria, just because a lot of nutrients will stick to the clay. And so they are not as available for the bacteria. At the same time, plant roots are always also hotspots for a microbiome within the soil, because plants will literally feed their bacteria. They will release compounds that feed the bacteria, and very often, depending on what they need, when the bacteria are lacking carbon, the plant will make an effort to release some extra carbon. But it might as well, like if the plant has some excess phosphorus, even though the plant's roots normally take up phosphorus, they can also release some just to give the beneficial bacteria that they got some extra food. It's
crazy. These things just would not occur to me, because obviously the furthest I ever got with, obviously it probably maybe touches on secondary school, but it was a case of we got a pot, we filled it with dirt, we put a seed in there and we watered it and kept it in the sun. That was it. That's as far as I ever got with keeping plants. All right, my parents like, gardening and things like that. I'm sure they know more than I do, without any doubt. But that's why, for me, when I've got these, enclosures, and I'm putting plants in there, and they're in organic peat-free topsoil with, some play sand thrown in as well, and I water them, and they've got lights on them, and then they die. I'm like, but why? As far as I'm aware, I'm giving it what it needs. And then you're hearing this, and you're going, oh God, I know absolutely nothing.
Like, honestly, like a lot of the stuff that I know about plants and plants nutrition, I don't even stick to this for my own house plants. They have some organic compost, and that's what they grow again. Like even my fucking cacti, they're not supposed to be in this sort of substrate. But if you do the timing of the watering right, it can work. But this is one of those things where I'm kind of convinced a reptile viv is maybe one of the worst places for any plant to exist in.
Yeah.
So what I think I would suggest is, just in order to have more luck with the plants, because the way you kind of got to think about when you buy a brand new plant from a nursery, first of all, it's coming out of conditions where lighting was perfect.
Yeah.
Soil was perfect. Nutrients was perfect. Everything was exactly as the plant wants it to grow as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And then you move it into different light. You give it a different watering regime. You just give it different access to nutrients. You give it a completely different soil texture. And you do it all at once.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, you get like a bearded dragon running over it.
That doesn't help. That definitely doesn't help.
Tourist shit doesn't help. So I think the first step would be, like, you said your parents are quite avid gardeners.
They do enjoy gardening, yeah.
Yeah, then, I don't know, get like somebody's old spider plant or whatever. Like one of those things that will produce runners all year long, basically whenever you need it. Like, I got a spider plant. It started off as like this little thing. It has gone from 2 little plants that I got into 10, and every time it produces like one of the offshoots, you will have 15 plants on there that you could cut off, put into water, and put into some extra soil.
Yeah.
And basically get your parents some nice big plants. If you want, I can give you some recommendations for plants that will just produce offshoots out the ass. I think, honestly, spider plants, it looks kind of like grass. It has bulbous roots that can store some water in case you don't really water it or whatnot. It produces solid roots that will actually grip to the ground. And if you have one big plant, you can have literally infinite clones of it. You can get it in the variegated, like striped form with some extra white. I got the pure green one, but if I wanted to, I could have 200 spider plants just this year. By waiting for the offshoots to properly grow, because every little fucking branch has like 5 of them on it, and I get 10 of these branches. Like,
I very recently got a spider plant, actually. I think it's the first time I've ever got one. I've put it in the Treee enclosure, which again, it's in a mix of organic topsoil and a little bit of play sand as well. Obviously no charcoal, because I didn't have any idea about that. There's a small jungle dawn in there, so there is lighting. It is quite a humid enclosure as well, because obviously crested gecko.
Humidity is normally very good for plants.
What is, sorry?
Humidity is normally pretty good for plants. Okay. Like, they would rather have some more humid than, at least in the air. When it comes to the soil, when it gets too wet, you cut off the oxygen to the roots, and then the roots die.
Right. I think
which
that's
is
the good thing about having the drainage layer on a crested
yeah,
enclosure. I
it's
mean,
like this is one of
obviously,
those things
yeah,
that are very good. Like this is why in a lot of times, like especially gecko vivaria, I think a lot of the plants would generally do pretty well. Because geckos also seem kind of nice, but if you're keeping it in a more arid enclosure, like first of all, like when you get the plant, just repot it into the mix that is also going to be present in the viv without actually putting it in the viv,
right, okay,
just so you get the, I don't know, unwanted soil that you maybe don't trust, even though like inorganic fertilizer, there's some, like if you get like these big grains of fertilizer maybe, but unless you're seeing like these big grains of fertilizer, yeah, you had some dissolved fertilizer. I don't see where any of that would really harm your animals, especially since it's a lot of compounds that are normally broken down pretty easily
mm-hmm.
biologically by bacteria. But this is one of those things. If you don't immediately put the animal into the viv, the fertilizer doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah,
Because by the time the animal goes in there, all the fertilizer has basically dissipated or been used by some sort of bacteria.
yeah.
But if you like kind of insist on immediately putting the plants and the animal together, because the plant needs to get adapted to the soil, it needs to get adapted to the lighting conditions,
Mm-hmm.
it needs to get adapted to an animal running over it.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like animals when they run over something or like nibble on it, that's something that sure as shit doesn't happen in like a plant nursery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like
of course.
you're not gonna find some bearded dragons running around nibbling on all sorts of plants in
Yeah,
like a proper plant nursery.
yeah.
And so I think the first step would be when you get plants, like have them before you even want to set up the vivarium.
Right,
Like
okay.
just have one window shelf full of plants.
Yeah.
Basically, when you get them, you put them in the sort of topsoil sand mix because for longevity, clay or charcoal is pretty much a must. If you swap the substrate out occasionally, you don't really need it,
Mm-hmm.
even though it sure as shit is going to help because
Yeah.
like, clay is a glue for everything. It will trap water, it will trap nutrients, it will trap organics, it will like everything just kind of sticks to the clay.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, once the clay is dry, it will also repel water for freaking ages. But
Yeah.
one of those things where, but you probably, for the longevity of your soil, you probably want some clay in there. But whatever substrate you're going to put them in, when you get the plant from the nursery, put it on the shelf for a week so it can get adapted to new lighting conditions.
Okay.
Then after 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, you get the plant out of the pot, you look how many roots you get in there. If it's fuck all roots, you can keep the same pot, just kind of shake off the soil and then replace, like dig the plant into the kind of substrate it would encounter in the vivarium you plan to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've let it in there for another 1 or 2 weeks, the longer the better. Then you plant it into the vivarium, and
Mm-hmm.
ideally, there it doesn't have contact with a reptile for at least another month, just so the roots get a chance to like
Yeah.
establish in the soil.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened with the snake plant in your milk snake vivarium.
Yeah.
The snake plant, it has like this big rhizome, And once this thing has established, there's almost no way of ripping this motherfucker out. I got one myself,
Yeah.
and it just forms this thick ass root, and you get like a new plant every time it goes up.
Yeah.
But other than that, you only have really skinny roots that
Hmm.
are not going to hold the plant. And until this plant has actually produced like new plants along the rhizome, it's a plant that has way too skinny roots for how rigid the leaves are. Because
Hmm.
if the snake is going to push against that, it's going to move the whole plant and it's going to rip off all the roots.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, there's different ways of preventing that. Like you could wait for it to root in. You can choose a much bigger pot than the plant might need and just have a couple of big rocks like throughout the soil, just so the roots can kind of root under some big rocks to give some
Yeah.
extra stability, also to prevent some digging,
Hmm.
which I think would also be very important. Or you just have like mosquito mesh, or like depending on the species, some wire mesh, like a bowl that the animal just can't get to.
Okay.
Because like that's one of those things I thought about. Yeah, if you get like a monitor and it wants to dig a burrow, where are you going to have the most stable entrance for the burrow long term? Of
Hmm.
course, where you got a shitload of roots that just stabilize the soil over your entrance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So of course, they start digging under the biggest plant that they can find. Because to me, it makes sense. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
instinctively that's where the most stable soil is going to be found, just because the roots going to keep it all together.
Hmm.
And additionally, if you got like this big bushy plant over, you also have the entrance hidden,
Yeah.
which is like this double whammy. You got a stable hidden entrance to your burrow.
Hmm.
What else do you want? And
Yeah. Yeah. Of
this
course.
is, I think this is one of those things why, especially like monitors, tend to immediately dig up their new plants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're like, cool, I got this really nice hidden entrance, and then the plant just falls over.
Yeah, yeah. And they go, oh, maybe not. And then you try again the next day and they do the
Yeah.
same thing. Well, I'll tell you what, let's put it this way, right? So let's, as you know, as I've already said, I'm building a new Viv for a Royal Python. So obviously I want to put some plants in there. And I want to give them the best chance possible. Now, this Viv is currently sat in my garden. There's no runners, there's no glass, no nothing. I haven't even put it where it's going to go yet because I haven't demolished what's there. So first things first, let's talk about the actual mix itself. So at the minute, what I usually do is organic peat-free topsoil and play sand. If I want to add charcoal to that, do you literally just mean the same charcoal that I'd use to do a barbecue?
Yeah, pretty much. Like
Is
if
it?
you
You
if
just
you get
smash it up.
don't get the like weird sort of blobs, but rather
Briquettes.
the like proper charcoal where you can still kind of identify that it
Yes.
used to be wood at some point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Crunch it up a little bit so you get like nice pieces. Do it outside because charcoal dust is no joke.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like 5-10%, and it will.
Okay.
It's non-decaying carbon, or same with clay. It's like this thing that a lot of the organics can kind of stick to,
Mm-hmm.
and it will give the soil more longevity if that is what you're going for. If you like swap out your substrate on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
this like that's the thing. If you look at like Serper Design or whatever, he makes his like super bioactive and everything, and his substrate mix, I think all of them feature some degree of charcoal and a lot of them also some clay, if not both. And
Mm-hmm.
for longevity, you kind of need that. But if you're going to swap it out anyways, it's just kind of an extra expense.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to switch out your substrate, honestly, just bury the fucking pot that the plant is in.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's if you get this surrounding that the plant is in, that the plant is doing well in, why change that?
Mm.
The
I mean,
other
for me personally, I'd like to get to the point where and this is I don't know if this is gonna sound bad or not, but I want to be able to do as little as possible to these enclosures that I can. So, for example, in the Tokay enclosure recently, I've just whacked a load of earthworms in there to help move the soil around because obviously it keeps moving things around. Now, if that's a good idea, then great.
worms are very good at decomposing like old leaves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They dig, so they aerate the soil, so lack of oxygen in the lower areas, as well as the buildup of things like methane and that sort of stuff in the lower areas, is prevented. So, like earthworms, I don't know why it's not like the one of the main components of a bioactive enclosure, because most reptiles don't really eat them, but at the end of the day, they dig more than springtails or isopods, and they leave those little drops of like basically pure fertilizer behind.
I think it's something I'm going to start implementing a lot in these enclosures, mainly the snakes. I don't know if the beardies would eat them. I know one of mine probably would. She's a gutty little bastard. But it just makes sense. Like I say, I do the isopods, I do the springtails and things like that. But like the more I've heard about it recently and I've seen it, the more it makes sense. Like why wouldn't you whack some earthworms in the substrate? Like it makes sense.
With beardies, I can imagine that the overall dryness of the substrate doesn't necessarily lend itself to the intended survival of earthworms. Like with the Tokay, you get this like super humid area, and they're like the worms are gonna thrive no problem. It might even be like they might even breed to the extent that you actually have to feed them, or you're gonna have a die off. Because like I don't know how fast the plants are growing and whatnot, and at what rate they're actually dropping some old leaves and all that sort of thing. But that's the thing, if you like the turnover of nutrients, if you look at an ecosystem, it just doesn't really compare to what you can kind of manage in a viv. Because normally, like even just the nutrient intake from the reptiles poop, it's kind of fuck all. And at the same time, it's a lot. That's the weird one. Individually, in one place, one reptile poop is a lot of nutrients that can feed a lot of animals. But the overall nutrient turnover in an ecosystem is so much higher in nature. Like to the point that the turnover is so high that the overall amount that's available at any given time is ridiculously low. Like there's literally jungles in this world that look like somebody vacuumed there, because every time a leaf drops, somebody is running out, grabbing that leaf and dragging it into their hide.
Is that why leaf litter is quite a good addition to these bioactive enclosures as well? Because obviously it's not only just for the isopods, but does the breakdown of that help the soil as well?
Yeah, it's you also get a bunch of fungi, and they are the main thing that also help break down any organic matter. Like any wood, bacteria typically can't do this that well, but when it comes to breaking down like sort of wood chips and that sort of stuff, that's usually fungi. At the same time, I talked about how like a patch of grass is more like a network rather than individual beings. They're like, I've seen papers where they had two plants in the same pot, and they had two barriers that only the mycelium of fungi could grow through. They basically the plants were connected through the same fungus mycelium. And the crazy part is that not only were they connected, they could swap nutrients. The plant swapped nutrients through the fungus.
Shit.
Like when you would give one plant nitrogen
Yeah.
and the other plant not, one plant would basically transfer nitrogen through the fungus to the other plant that needed it.
That's crazy.
It's absolutely incredible. The
Unbelievable.
kind of shit that nature gets up to is
You just wouldn't. It's just not a thought that would come to your mind. Like, again, unless you're researching it or you see it, for me, that just wouldn't be a thought that comes to mind. It just wouldn't. And then when you say it,
who expects that? Like, it is so far-fetched, but you get like this paper, and basically, we had this one plant that got sufficient nitrogen. We had this special fungus growing in it, and the other plant had more nitrogen than it realistically had available in its soil.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it's kind of hard to argue with the findings if you have more of an element than this plant should be able to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Transfer through from one plant into the fungus into the, it's
Crazy.
When I first said that, it completely blew my mind. But now, like, as I've gotten to understand the whole soil ecosystem more, it keeps fascinating me. And the one thing that this thing needs is time.
Okay.
Because like that's the thing. Either you set it up to have it for several years, or you replace it on a regular basis. Because if you want to keep it for several years, like realistically, it is going to take 2 or 3 months to properly establish itself. For all the excess nutrients, all the unformed complexes to form, to bind up nutrients, so you don't have like a bacterial bloom in there anymore. And all of that takes time, and like it's not days, it's months. But realistically, the soil needs to find its balance, basically. Because as long as it hasn't found its balance, there's excess nutrients, which is excess bacterial growth. But once the soil has been established, like you will have bacteria. Like we know that under ideal conditions, bacteria can split every like half an hour, whatever. Every hour you could have double as many bacteria as before. Under ideal conditions, in like a laboratory, perfect conditions, perfect nutrients, whatever. In the soil, they split maybe once a month. Because nutrients just aren't there. This is another one of those things. The bacterial or microbial activity around the plant roots is so much higher. Again, because normally either you have the inorganic nutrients, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your iron, like all sorts of mineral nutrients basically, or carbon. One of those two is normally lacking. And the plants, for their beneficial bacteria, will kind of buffer that. If they are lacking nitrogen or phosphorus, the plant will provide that for the bacteria that benefits it. And when they're lacking organic carbon to digest, basically as an energy source, the plant will also provide that if it can.
But like you say, the bacteria has to be established for that relationship to happen first. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, it has to be established. And the thing is, if you only got compost, the biodiversity in there isn't necessarily that high. Because it's just bacteria that are involved in like decay versus the like in an established soil on some grass. And like the way you could do this is like literally if you want to set up some long-term soil, like just get a couple of spatulas full of like soil from the forest from different places or whatnot. Unfortunately, again, this is one of those things. You can also very well get things you don't want. You can get snails with parasites and all that
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of shit in there.
Yeah.
But just from a soil health perspective, you want as much biodiversity in the soil as possible, because
Okay.
the bacteria again gonna start also competing with each other,
Yeah.
and this will slow the whole turnover of nutrients in the soil down, which is long term kind of what you want. Because if the soil has a very limited amount of nutrients available, the faster everything in the soil will go for things like reptile droppings, because it
Yeah.
represents a more readily available nutrient source. And this is one of those things where, like, I'm personally not the biggest fan of even the term bioactive, because it's like we both have kind of an idea what bioactive means.
Yeah.
But to me, it's more of a buzzword than
Yeah.
because, like, if you like, this is one of the very few things I saw about. I saw from like the. He's been on the Animals at Home podcast a couple of times. The Arcadia guy with the long hair, I forget his name.
Oh,
And
John.
really, yeah, really knowledgeable guy, and I very much enjoy listening to him. But he made this Instagram post where it was like, yeah, just because you have naturalistic and that sort of stuff, it doesn't mean you have a bioactive. And like, I basically responded in like this long ass text where it was basically like, all right, if your definition of bioactive is just that you have an ecosystem that over time will break down waste, I can start with an empty PVC enclosure and just never clean it. The poop is going to get broken down. You will have definitely springtails that set up shop in there at some point, because springtails are fucking everywhere. You're going to have fungi. You're going to have bacteria. And as the poop layer grows thicker, the faster the decomposition will go. And if your criteria is, it has to get broken down over time, me not cleaning out my bare bottom bearded dragon tank for half a year, by that definition, is kind of bioactive.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we both kind of agree that's not really what people say when they say bioactive. That's not what they mean. It's not like a dirty, neglected tank, something that needs upkeep. And it's like aquascaping to me. Like, I have planted tanks. I also have structures in there. But at what point does my planted tank become an aquascape? Because my other tank has a bunch of branches in there. They are arranged in a certain way that I find aesthetically pleasing. And I got plants that I planted relative to that. Like, is that an aquascape now? To me, that's a planted tank with some hiding opportunities for my plecos. But, like, where's the border? And same with bioactive and naturalistic.
Yeah, I think that's starting to get spoken about a bit more now. I think people are starting to say, it doesn't have to necessarily be bioactive. It can just be naturalistic. You don't have to go the full hog, because at the end of the day, like you say, what is bioactive? At what point do we sit there and go, this is bioactive, this isn't? Like you say, can you just put springtails in a tub and say it's bioactive? Probably not. No, but
to some degree, you could argue it maybe is.
But then you could argue yes, but
there's also like, that's the thing. It's
like when people are trying to say bioactive, it's like you've got this idea in your head of the topsoil, the isopods, the lights, the things like that. And like you say, it's more of a buzzword, almost to get a point across as to what you've done. It's not. There's no sort of black and white. Here's your categories. Here's what you need to be
And
hitting
I
to
will say,
achieve it.
like that, I think that was also John's main point. A lot of times, the term naturalistic vivarium would be a much more appropriate term.
Yeah,
that's why I agree with him. But again, like it's the how the fuck do you define bioactive?
yeah.
It
So
doesn't entirely work.
if we go back to obviously what we were saying with regards to like using the example of my next enclosure, so I'd go for the topsoil, a bit of sand, and some charcoal. What did you say? 5-10% of the mix will be charcoal.
Something like that. Charcoal. Like try to squash it up a little bit so it has like
or
sort
smash
of
it up and put it in there.
Yeah, just mix it in there.
Okay. What about, so obviously with leaf litter, could you also mix that in with that mixture? So as opposed to just laying it on the top, could you like crush some leaf litter in there as well? Would that help?
The thing is, your normal organic topsoil is basically what the leaf litter is going to be in 3 months' time.
Right. Okay. So that's more.
It's
okay.
It's plant matter that's in the process of being broken down. And so, yes, you very much can add leaf litter, but essentially you're gonna add same to same. Like the material that makes up the organic compost is going to be the same thing that's found in your leaf litter. So it's something that is probably, maybe a little bit of it will help like worms, isopods establish within the soil. That like as isopod food, it might very well be a good option to just have like some oak leaves or whatever crumbled into the soil mix itself. But as far as just organic matter goes, you should have that in like the organic part, like in the compost part. So the leaf litter is more like feeding the custodians and also like containing humidity, which is, and just being enrichment for the animal as well. But
of course. I do love a bit of leaf litter, like even if it's literally just for the animals. I've the last time I put a load in with Ragnar, obviously she just claws through it, and you can see that tongue working, you can see the brain ticking over, and it's really good to do. It's really good fun. Like it's got its benefits, of course, for the soil and things like that, like we've been saying, but just to see her exploring it and scratching through it and trying to find stuff is incredible.
And at the same time, it also gives you a good feeling that the animal you're keeping is actually interested in that. Because, there's some leaves, I'm going to go back basking. It could be an option, but no. Ragnar goes exploring. It's like, what's this? And this is just something, especially with an animal as intelligent as a monitor lizard. Getting that brain to work is almost essential. Like if you want to properly keep this animal, like get that brain working, because that brain is very much capable of working.
Definitely. And they're not just, they're not robots at the end of the day. These are, living beings with, thoughts and feelings, and, they explore, they think, they feel, it's incredible. All you need to do is sit and watch her for an hour, as long as it's not the hour she's basking in the morning, because you'd get quite bored. But all you have to do is just chuck something new in there for her, and she's on it. She's on it, and it's all part of the fun, because you're also benefiting the animal, but it's just something that, it's better for you as well, because you feel better about yourself for making this animal think and do more and have more in their life.
Yeah, very much. And to some degree, like all vertebrates' brains and even invertebrates' brains to some degree work the same. You got a stimuli and you have an association, be it positive or negative. That's why you can literally train worms. You can condition worms
Yeah.
in the same way. Like, if you do something and associate it with something bad, you could train worms to avoid something. If you do
I
something
didn't
to
know
a
that.
worm that isn't necessarily negative to it, and you reward it with some good food, you can train worms to do shit. And
Yeah.
the crazy part is that's literally the same bridge that people use to train dogs. It works on rainworms as well.
That's incredible.
It's just the association that of something being beneficial or not.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
to some degree, I can see where this comes from, because if you're an animal that's trying to survive somewhere in the wild, having an idea what's good for you and what's not good for you
Mhm.
is pretty beneficial.
It
Doesn't
is, yeah.
matter if you're a millipede or a fucking Komodo dragon. Or
Yeah.
like
Mm.
having
Yeah.
the ability to adapt to certain stimuli is helpful
Yeah.
for pretty much any animal, like even bacteria.
Yeah.
Even bacteria will seek out nutrient sources or
Mm.
avoid predators.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff. And this is all,
Crazy.
it's all kind of complicated, and to some degree it's still the same underlying principle. And
Yeah.
on the other hand, it's you also get this like over humanization, I might say, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, like my bearded dragon loves cuddling with me, and it's like this animal that closed both its eyes and is way too cold and can't really move,
Yeah.
and so it's just kind of given up. And so it's always the stage. There are commonalities, but there are also very much differences, and
Yeah.
that's one of those things where to properly understand that, it's like you got to put in a lot of effort.
Mhm.
Just figuring things out. And honestly, this is one of those things where I often feel like the do your own research crowd often, I feel like, has a tendency to see science as a little bit more simple than it is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of frustrating, because a lot of times the basic findings of a scientific study can very much be summed up fairly easily.
Mhm.
But as soon as you go into the details, the nuances, and how to integrate this finding into a wider body of research,
Yeah.
like I studied chemistry, even reading chemistry books in German, it's for me like I'm reading an entirely different language,
Mhm.
because like I've kind of gotten good at explaining even fairly complicated stuff to friends if they're interested. But in German, we have this phrase for it. It's Fachchinesisch. And it's like specialist Chinese. It's literally you speaking the same language that you are speaking before. But
Yeah.
it's so many words that you will never use in everyday life. Never.
Yeah.
The causalities, and very often like tiny little causalities in like one little side sentence or whatever are very much important. And like you've literally have to have read the relevant literature properly to spot that just this one little grammatic quirk might actually be relevant to what the author is trying to say.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is where I think a lot of the problems that we currently have within a lot of our societies of like solving problems kind of come from. Because what's it called? Dunning-Kruger effect? People that know fuck all about something feel like they know the most about everything. You see this in websites a lot, and like you can spot that shit everywhere else.
Yeah.
People who might have gotten a rough introduction to any given topic. Like any given topic.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times those are very relevant topics. Like climate change. Most of us agree it's happening, but diving into what exactly the consequences are if it gets 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, 3 degrees warmer, even most climate scientists don't entirely know, because the system that they're studying is vast and complex, and even to this day not entirely understood.
Yeah.
All we're knowing is it's getting warmer
Yeah.
rapidly.
Yeah.
Like that's the one thing that's literally impossible to argue about at this point. And still, there's so much information out there where even well-meaning reporters just get the facts wrong. There's like this sort of meme among sort of more skeptical people. Oh yeah, they predicted that Europe was going to freeze over at some point. The background of that is part of the Gulf Stream is powered by salty, warm water evaporating all the heat into the air and then sinking down. And that basically pulls the ocean current along towards Europe.
Yeah.
It's part of the Gulf Stream. It's the halo thermal gradient. I don't know. It's something in the Atlantic that basically makes the Gulf Stream a little bit stronger and gives us extra heat. And if this stuff gets too diluted up north because all the ice is melting, less heat from the Gulf of Mexico is going to be pumped over to us, which means in Europe it's going to get colder. The main problem is even the people that study it are like, yeah, we know this system is vulnerable, and our best guess is this shit might stop at any point, but we have no way of knowing when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen at all.
Yeah.
We just don't know. But then it gets to like reporters and stuff, and yeah, maybe there's going to be some climatic change due to some water sinking down in front of Norway.
Yeah.
Just doesn't do a headline.
It sensationalizes it. That's the problem.
Yes.
It's all about getting clicks. It's all about getting, because the thing is, I had this conversation with someone recently now. I enjoy a bit of clickbait on YouTube. That's fine. But mine is harmless. Mine is, I'm sorry I lied to you. And then it turns out I said I wasn't going to get any more reptiles and I got a blue tongue skink. That's not harming anyone. It's not scaring anyone. It's a bit of clickbait. But then when you've got, an article that says, is Australia going to burn in the next 10 years? And is England going to be flooded and lost? And are we all going to have to live on ships? To get someone to click on that article, and then there's adverts in that article that with each click builds more revenue and things like that. Yeah, that's the problem. It's sensationalizing it and it's overdoing it. And it's because then even if you do read one of these articles, it says, but we don't know for a fact, and this is how it could be, and this is only rumor, and this is just what, or you've got the ones that say, yeah, but if it's going to happen, it won't happen for 10 million years, so don't worry. Yeah. It's all just to get, because the problem is a lot of people will look at these articles, they'll read the headline and they won't read on. Yeah. And then that's what you say, like they'll get that brief bit of, you can't even call it information, but they'll get something that they consider information, and then they'll go to the next person and say, I wouldn't move to Australia, mate, because in 10 years' time, it's going to all be on fire.
Honestly, I can see Australia being completely on fire within the next 10 years.
maybe it's lucky I
Exactly
didn't
what
move
you
there
mean.
then.
And honestly, like in social media, it just doesn't help because
No.
it's all about clicks. And this is
Yeah.
one of those things like I made Instagram because of like this community. I didn't use it, and like I'm at this point, like I have a couple of people I stay in touch with, and that's kind of all I use it for.
Yeah.
And it has like all the hallmarks of like a meta associated social media platform.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Facebook, and from what I've seen also Instagram, is the algorithms are very much optimized towards getting as much engagement, as much time out of people.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that kind of fucks this whole thing up, which is like, yeah, all right, this is like a target for social media companies. I can kind of see this as like sort of legit. Yeah, you want as much time for the people to spend on there. However, it turns out that the stronger the emotional response to anything is, the higher the engagement is. If
Mm-hmm.
something makes you really happy or really fucking angry, you're more
Yeah.
likely to comment than,
Yeah.
I don't know, having like a light chuckle at some mildly funny joke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%.
And
100%.
I feel like the sort of short form, or like you have a little post or you have like one picture or 30-second video, it just lends itself. There's like a lot of throughput content wise. And so once Meta has kind of figured out what makes you angry, it's going to serve you more of that. It's
Yeah.
because you're going to comment, you're going
Yeah.
to like argue with people, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to
You're going to engage.
be on this post, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, yeah, like I occasionally use Instagram, and like I'm kind of training the algorithm. Yeah, just show me nature pictures and some reptiles, please. That's
Yeah.
all I'll have. Like anything else, I'll just kind of scroll past. And
Well, like I say, to be fair, the videos, I don't post them anymore. They were never live feeding videos because we're obviously A, we're not allowed to feed live in the UK, and B, I wouldn't even if we were allowed to, because I don't really get enjoyment from seeing another animal die. But the most views and the most comments and the most everything that I would get from a reel on Instagram would be feeding videos. If it was a video of me feeding a dead rat to a snake, you can guarantee that was the one that was going to do the best, because you'd get the hate comments, you'd get people calling you a piece of shit, you'd get the people arguing saying, yeah, but this snake has got to eat. It's the ones that created the most engagement.
yeah,
It's crazy, but but if I put up a video of, I don't know, let's just say Ragnar digging through some leaf litter, people who enjoy monitors and who enjoy reptiles will like it, but it's not going to get sent out to a wider audience because people are going to be like,
yeah.
so, and that's the
It's cool to see and like maybe like it. It's like, oh yeah, it's a monitor lizard digging through
but
some
it
leaves.
won't create
It's cool to see.
conversation and argument.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah,
argument to be had. Everybody agrees. That's
exactly.
cool to look at.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, it's and like we're talking to the point where like even like rage farming is like of the like kind of the harmless part.
Mm-hmm.
Like there has been an incident in Myanmar where several thousand people died, and the main factor in there was hate speech spread on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, Facebook pretty much has been responsible for a arguably fairly small genocide, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of crazy to think about it that just automated algorithms that look for specific stuff, it can go so awry so quickly.
I've just had a thought where I can't believe that we started a conversation about tetras and now we're discussing Facebook and miniature genocide. This podcast is wild. I tell you what, there's no predicting it. There's no predicting it. Like I say, we started off by talking about that and then soil and worms, and now it's Jesus. We've got deep here.
Yeah, social media is a magic place where all the good things happen.
Yeah. Social media is wild. I mean, obviously, episode 1 of Riddler's Rambles was with George, who the predominantly we did speak about social media and the good and bad parts of it. It can be good because it can connect you with people. You can find like-minded people. You can meet friends. You can learn a lot. But you've also got the other side, like you've just said. That's madness. You can have the other side where people can racially abuse people. You can be hated for being gay, trans. You can be hated for just being yourself. You can be hated for just being yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've had hate comments for feeding snakes their food. And it's crazy what social media is capable of. It really is. Like, it can be fear-mongering. It can be reassuring. It can be...
And honestly, like in the reptile community, from what I've seen, it's been kind of harmless. Like because that's the thing. There's always these people that understand the algorithms a little bit better, and they're not trying to like spread a certain message out there. They're just there for reaction farming.
Yeah.
What gets a reaction out of people? What makes them argue with somebody else for like 20 comments in a row? And honestly, like if you compare that to like the general community here, it's like a bunch of people like digitally getting together and chatting a little bit of shit. And all just being interested in reptiles. And it's like the most wholesome fucking thing that you can have. But it's like this tiny little thing.
Yeah.
And the internet is just so much bigger than these tiny little communities of like-minded people. And it's to some degree incredible to see, and to some degree also kind of scary.
Yeah.
Because like there's just so many shitty information floating around the internet, and unless you like, that's the thing, a lot of times you actually have to have looked into any given topic to detect the bullshit. Like, unless you either have somebody that you trust with whatever the topic at hand is that you can ask, doing your own research, this phrase that gets thrown around a lot, it is very much possible. Like, science, that's another weird one. Science has never been more accessible and also kind of inaccessible at the same time. It's like, I don't know how openly I can say it. There is like the sort of Pirate Bay for scientific papers.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to say is, without this website, my master and my bachelor thesis would not have been possible in the extent that they were. That's all I'm like, the fees that the publishers for the scientific papers are asking, it's fucking stupid. Like, I went to a well-funded university, and even like, to get just one full subscription from one of the publishers, we're talking tens of thousands of euros every single year just for partial access to scientific papers of one publisher. There's a couple of big ones where if you like get a couple of licenses, where you get for a reasonable price, you get most of the things that get published through this publisher.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
But usually it's never the papers that you need.
yeah. That sounds about right.
And so yeah, I usually by the way, this is one of those things. If you mention this website in a YouTube comment, YouTube will automatically nuke your comment.
Okay.
Like,
so
I've
note
tried
to everyone watching.
times.
Yeah. If anyone watching this knows this website, don't comment it, otherwise I'm out.
1 second, I'm gonna get a little piece of paper.
Yeah, all right, mate.
Is it the right way around?
Yes, it is.
This thing.
Okay.
It sounds like a website that does a little bit different things, but yeah. Go to Wikipedia.
That's the first thing that came to my mind. That is, I must
find the current domain, the .se for Sweden. The Swedish domain tends to work pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, if you ever need a scientific paper.
There you go. So for anyone interested, there you go. Baum, you've just done God's work for everyone there. So well done. Appreciate that.
And like, that's the thing. Like, my scientific thesis would have been literally impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you have a lot of like open access publishers, basically where you can access the papers for free, and you will have some publishers that actually do like the proper peer review process.
Yeah.
Like where people that know about the topic will actually look through your paper. But there's also sort of, pay to win sort of publishers that will,
right.
like, because basically when you do like open access, like you basically have to pay a fee for it to be open access. Okay. So you pay like, oftentimes in the more reputable ones, we're also talking like 2,000-3,000 euros that you have to pay just for a paper to be accessible to everyone. And like in science, if you plan to publish a paper, which most projects that you get like a grant for or whatever, normally you will have, like, if you plan to publish something, the fee for publishing it, you will put as part of the proposal for the grant. Like, if you go through like, this is how much money we need. Yeah, we also need like $3,000 to publish our fucking paper somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
And
crazy.
Like, that's the thing. The publishers do fuck all. Like the people that peer review it, that actually know the science, that spend their time putting in corrections, putting in criticisms, whatever, before you get it back and you have to correct it. Those people normally aren't paid.
Yeah.
They do this voluntarily. Yeah. The publishers keep all the fucking money. Like if it was like, it's like $2,000 to publish, and you got 3 peer reviewers, they all get $500, and then the fourth $500 is for us for like publishing. And all right, no, the publisher keeps $2,000. The peer reviewers do this voluntarily, don't see any money from it. The publisher, like the person who wrote the paper, doesn't see any money from it. And it's just some wanker that has a website that gets all the money for the proceedings. And we're talking like a lot of times, especially from the bigger publishers, when you access a paper, we're talking $30 to $40 for 24-hour access.
Oh, that's madness.
And
madness.
It's just kind of crazy. It's
mad.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where I'm genuinely convinced if we didn't have the high seas of the internet, this would be holding back science so much. Because I'm in Germany. Our universities comparatively are fucking loaded with money. Even universities that generally struggle. Like, if you're some little university in some less economically developed African country, good luck paying that license fee. Like, if even German universities can't fucking do it, if your country gets the license,
Yeah. Right. We've been going for over 2.5 hours now. I think we should start wrapping up a little bit.
Yeah, it might be a good idea. I mean, I can go on for another hour. I don't care.
I could as well. I've really enjoyed this. Like, it doesn't feel like it's been over 2.5 hours, to be fair. So fair play. It's been great. But before we go, have you got any questions for me?
No, not really at the moment. No.
Excellent. Well, if you think of any, feel free to message me. But
yeah.
To be honest, mate, I'll probably be messaging you again anyway, because when I set up this enclosure and I'm doing the soil and the planting and all of that, I'm probably going to be picking your brains again.
Yeah.
I appreciate your help, because already you've given me some ideas, and I've literally been sat here and I'm going, well, I could go and get some charcoal now. I can't. It's 10:30 at night at time of recording. I'm not going to leave now and go. But you know what I mean? With me in my head, I'm like, right, I need to go and get that done. But I will be picking your brains. I will be implementing some of these things that we've spoken about.
Yeah,
and
hopefully
we've helped some people out in the that have been watching as well. So
like, at the end of the day, if you want, just like check my Instagram in the description. It's not really connected to anything else I do, but if people want to message me and like pick my brains on any topic that we touched on,
all right.
Even if I can't really help, I'm always happy to look into if I can actually help in some way, shape, or form.
Well, so, say if you're happy to, I'll put your Instagram in the description.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. But otherwise, to be honest with you, mate, this has been superb. Like, because the thing is, when I said at the beginning that you're a bit of an enigma and not really, we've never spoken. We've spoken online, like, messaging and things like that. But this is the first time they are seeing your face. This is the first time I've seen your face. So, but this is what I mean. So I wasn't sure. I was like, I knew it'd be good, but the fact that 2.5 hours has disappeared without us realizing it's been really, really good. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I'd be happy to do it again if that ever comes up.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Do you know what? I think we will have to do a second one at some point, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So
probably by the time I actually have a reptile.
Oh, mate, honestly, that would be class. Yeah, you'll have to come on and let us know how you're getting on with your. Or first, we'll have to find out what you've chosen, and second, we'll have to find out how you're getting on in the world of reptiles.
I'm as curious what I'm going to actually end up with as you are.
But yeah, no, man. So again, thank you for coming on. I do really appreciate you coming on. It's been great. It's been really good, really, really good. And for everyone watching, thank you. If you have stuck around for the entire 2.5 hours plus, we appreciate your time.
You crazy motherfuckers.
You crazy motherfuckers. But yeah, so if you haven't already, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all of the good stuff.
Ring the notification bell.
notification. But you know what? I
The
do
algorithm very much likes that.
All right, I'm gonna have to start asking that one as well on my videos as well. I need to finish a couple of videos in the next few days. But anyway, I will get to that. But yeah, thank you all, Baum and or Treee. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, mate, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Bye, everyone.
Peace out.